You hear the first sound before the sun itself arrives. The quiet slap of bare feet on marble. The kind of sound that vanishes too quickly, swallowed by the stone that made Rome eternal. The villa sleeps around you, heavy with the perfume of burnt cedar and last night's wine. Somewhere outside, the crows are already circling above the Tiber, but in here, everything is still. The kind of stillness that listens. A boy moves through that silence. He can't be more than 14. His skin gleams faintly, dusted with oil that smells of myrrh and rose. He kneels beside a bronze mirror, the metal warped by heat, and studies the reflection that never quite belongs to him. His eyes are large and dark, rimmed with sleeplessness. His hands tremble as he lifts a small ivory comb through hair that has been oiled and straightened so many times it no longer feels like his own. He pauses, listens, then moves again. The morning light begins to slide across the walls. Frescoes of gods frozen in their pleasure, their painted bodies entwined in endless indulgence. The boy glances at them as if they might be watching, as if one of them might save him. None ever does. He reaches for a vial of perfume. The scent is sharp, almost sweet enough to hide the sweat that fear leaves behind. He dabs it along his throat, then his wrists. Not for beauty, not for himself, for obedience. His master likes the smell of rose oil before breakfast. He learned that the hard way. You can hear the faint clink of metal from his wrist as he lifts the vial again. A bracelet that is not jewelry but ownership. It marks him in ways the skin cannot hide. He straightens the folds of his silk tunic, smoothing them again and again until they lie perfectly, until the fabric obeys him the way he must obey everything else. Then a sound cuts through the air, a man's voice calling his name, low, commanding, familiar. The boy's entire body stiffens, the vial slipping from his fingers and shattering against the marble. The perfume spills out, dark and fragrant, spreading like blood across the stone. He does not move to clean it. He only bows his head. You can feel the weight in the air change, the invisible shift between stillness and dread. His breath quickens, but his face smooths into practiced calm. Every emotion erased. Every memory tucked away behind that blank, graceful mask Rome taught him to wear. He takes a single step forward. The chain at his neck glints faintly in the half-light. Beyond the doorway, footsteps approach, slow, measured, deliberate. The rhythm of power, the rhythm of ownership. You follow him as he walks toward the sound, your own reflection caught briefly in the polished wall. The villa seems to hold its breath. Columns cast long shadows like prison bars across the mosaic floor. Somewhere, water trickles in a marble basin, steady, unbothered, eternal. The boy's shadow merges with the marble as he kneels. The master's silhouette appears in the doorway, broad and gilded by light. No words are spoken, none are needed. The boy's stillness is his greeting, his surrender, his duty. Here, in the house of marble and silence, beauty is a command, obedience is art, and suffering is ceremony. And in this world, in Rome, his pain is not a tragedy. It is a luxury. You're still here, watching him, aren't you? You didn't turn away. Most people would. If history still makes your chest tighten, then you belong with us, with Cave Tales Ancient History. Subscribe, because these stories deserve witnesses. And if you don't, tell us in the comments why silence feels safer. The marble fades. The villa becomes only one house among thousands. Across the empire there are others. Villas with the same echoing corridors, the same polished silence, the same ritual of ownership repeated until cruelty becomes invisible. But before the boy knelt on that floor, before his name became a possession, his story began somewhere else, in the noise of the market. It starts in the ports. Ships creak beneath the weight of their cargo, amphorae of wine, bolts of silk, sacks of grain, and the chained bodies of children. The air stinks of salt and sweat and the wet rope that binds them. Traders shout in Latin and Greek, haggling over prices as easily as they breathe. The market scribes record every transaction with perfect handwriting, each name written once, then crossed out when sold. The routes stretch across the world, Rome swallowed. From the mountain villages of Gaul, from the islands of Greece, from the dry hills of Syria. Caravans march toward the sea, escorted by soldiers who do not speak to those they guard. Some boys are taken after battles. Others are sold by their own families to pay debts or taxes. To the dealers, the reasons don't matter. What matters is skin, symmetry, and youth. By the time they reach the capital, the boys are no longer called by their names. They are merchandise. The dealers whisper numbers instead of words. Age, height, weight, voice. Each detail becomes a calculation. A field slave costs 500 denarii, a kitchen servant, perhaps 700. But a boy with unblemished skin and soft features can fetch 10,000. The same sum that could build a small villa outside the city walls. In the markets of Rome, the trade has its own rhythm. The auctioneer's hammer falls like a drumbeat. Buyers gather beneath the awnings to avoid the sun, their eyes fixed not on faces but on profit. One boy is told to walk, to turn, to lift his arms. Another is ordered to sing, his voice trembling through exhaustion. The buyers listen carefully, not for talent, but for the high, fragile tone that means he is still young enough to mold. Dealers prepare them with care. Before each auction, slaves are washed, polished with oil, and taught to stand in flattering poses. Pumice stones scrape away every trace of body hair. White powder lightens the skin, hiding bruises and scars. The dealers know that purity sells best when it looks fragile. They rub herbs into swollen eyes, stain lips red, and command the boys to smile. The smallest imperfection can cut the price in half. In one corner of the market, a Syrian trader named Cassius displays his delicate stock. He records every preference of his elite clients, the senator who wants a boy with curled hair, the merchant who insists on blue eyes, the matron who demands one trained to sing. These lists are written in the same neat columns used for cattle and horses. When one of the boys coughs from fever, Cassius sighs and writes beside his name a single word: replace. You can almost hear the language of commerce roll through the crowd. Fine shoulders. Good teeth. Still unbroken. Buyers test the softness of skin with the same fingers they use to judge the ripeness of fruit. They lift chins, pinch arms, pull at lips to see the whiteness of the teeth. A scribe notes the winning bid. A seal is stamped in wax. The boy is led away, and another takes his place. There is no violence here that anyone calls violence. It is efficient, organized, normal. The empire's wealth depends on it. Every banquet that celebrates victory is served by hands that never chose to be there. By the end of the day, the market quiets. The sun slides behind the temples, and the traders count their coins. The unsold are led back to their cages to wait for morning. The air is thick with the sourness of sweat and fear, the smell of coins still warm from human palms. In the shadows, the boys whisper to one another in broken languages, asking where they will go next. None of them realize they've already arrived at the heart of Rome's perfection, the place where beauty begins with suffering. If you're still here, listening, you already know this isn't just a story about the past. The words may be Latin, the marble ancient, but the trade, the idea that a life can be priced, has never gone away. Don't turn away from it. Subscribe to Cave Tales Ancient History and carry their names with you. If you won't, then say why in the comments. Tell the world why silence still feels safer. The villa stands again before you, vast and quiet under the midday sun. Beyond its outer walls, the cries of the marketplace fade into the hum of distant traffic, the heartbeat of Rome itself. Inside, everything moves in rhythm. The rustle of silk, the scrape of sandals on tile, the whisper of a command obeyed before it is spoken. The boy from the market has arrived. His body is still sore from travel, his voice hoarse from silence. But there is no time for rest. Training begins at once. The pedagogue enters first, an old Greek slave whose voice cuts through the air like a blade. He doesn't speak of kindness. He speaks of posture. Stand straight, eyes lowered, lips soft, but never smiling, hands clasped, but never clenched. Every gesture must appear effortless, though it is anything but. When the boy falters, a rod corrects his spine. A word corrects his tone. Rome demands beauty that never resists. Days blend into weeks, and the villa becomes a school of obedience. Mornings are for grooming and silence. The boy learns to walk the marble paths without a sound, to move with a grace that conceals exhaustion. He practices the subtle tilt of the head that signals submission, the delicate placement of hands when serving wine, the way to breathe without seeming to breathe at all. By afternoon, he studies what Rome calls refinement. He recites the verses of Ovid, though he cannot yet read. He memorizes lines that celebrate love as ownership, beauty as currency. The tutor corrects every mispronunciation with a sharp blow, not out of cruelty but precision. The boy learns to smile when praised, to weep only in private. Praise itself becomes a leash, gentle, polished, and unbreakable. Music lessons fill the evening. He learns to play the lyre until his fingers blister, to sing in tones that please the master's guests. Each song is a test. Each note must carry the illusion of joy. A wrong pitch means the lash. A perfect performance earns a nod, perhaps a touch of approval, enough to make him believe that obedience brings safety. It does not. It only brings another lesson. Behavioral codes govern every moment. How to laugh without sound. How to meet the master's eyes for exactly one heartbeat before looking away. How to stand close enough to serve but never close enough to exist. Every motion is practiced until instinct dies and imitation takes its place. The boy's reflection in the bronze mirror begins to move on its own, perfectly timed, perfectly trained. The punishments are quiet, methodical. No broken bones, no public display. Rome prefers its discipline elegant. A missed note in song means fasting. A clumsy gesture during dinner means isolation in the cold storage room until dawn. The worst punishment is not pain but neglect. Days without acknowledgement, a reminder that invisibility is worse than suffering. Praise becomes the only warmth left. A word of approval from the master carries more weight than the touch of sunlight. The boy learns to crave it, to anticipate it, to shape his every thought around earning it again. This is Rome's true artistry, not in sculpture or empire, but in the molding of the human soul until it bends willingly. Education itself is a mirror of power. He is taught to discuss poetry, philosophy, and the language of love, but only as performance. At dinner, he listens to senators debate politics while he stands behind them, holding wine. He is trained to smile when they reference beauty, to laugh softly when they mock innocence. He becomes part of the furniture that flatters the room. His knowledge is not freedom, it is ornament. At night, when the villa sleeps, he lies awake, replaying every movement from the day. He wonders if there was ever a time when he spoke without waiting for permission. The silence answers him. Even his dreams are disciplined, neat, controlled, without rebellion. Rome calls this civilization. It calls it refinement, order, virtue. But beneath the marble floors and scented oils lies a truth darker than any battlefield. Here, conquest does not need swords. It needs only training, repetition, and the soft destruction of identity until obedience feels like grace. You've seen what perfection cost in Rome. Silence. Don't stay silent too. Subscribe to Cave Tales Ancient History if history's victims deserve to be remembered. Or tell us in the comments why forgetting them feels easier. Morning begins before the sun has reached the garden walls. The villa is still in darkness, but the concubine's day has already started. He rises from a narrow couch that smells faintly of oil and damp linen. Around him, the other attendants sleep. Kitchen slaves, scribes, the porter who guards the outer door. He moves without waking them, his steps silent, his breath measured. The cold of the marble floor climbs into his bones. The first ritual is cleansing. A bronze basin filled with water from the household cistern waits by the window. He kneels beside it and washes, not to remove dirt, but to erase sleep. Servants arrive with scented oils and fine powders. His skin is rubbed until it glows. The air fills with the sweetness of almond and frankincense. The process is slow, methodical, almost ceremonial. Every motion is watched by the overseer, who checks for any flaw, a bruise, a scar, a change in complexion. When the grooming is complete, his hair is arranged in the fashion his master prefers, parted, oiled, and curled with a heated iron. The faint scent of singed hair mixes with perfume. A tunic of thin silk, dyed pale blue, slides over his shoulders. Around his wrists are gold bands, light enough to gleam, heavy enough to remind. From a distance, he could be mistaken for nobility. Up close, the difference is unmistakable. He does not choose the clothes he wears, the words he speaks, or the thoughts he allows himself to keep. Breakfast is taken standing. A tray of figs, cheese, and watered wine. He eats quickly, eyes fixed on the courtyard where the sun now begins to rise. It paints the marble colonnades in gold, the same color that decorates the statues of the gods. For a moment, the villa seems beautiful. Then the moment passes, and the rhythm of service begins. He attends to his master's dressing, arranging the toga, polishing the rings, fastening the sandals. Every gesture must be invisible. If the master notices, it means the motion was imperfect. Silence is the highest praise. When the master leaves for the forum, the concubine follows at a distance, carrying scrolls or messages. To the public eye, he is an ornament of success, a sign that the man he serves is powerful enough to own beauty. People glance, then look away. No one questions why he does not walk beside his master, only behind. By midday, the villa stirs with preparation for the evening meal. Musicians tune their instruments, slaves lay out silver and crystal, cooks stoke the fires. The concubine is summoned again. He practices the songs he will sing, the lines of verse he will recite. The steward rehearses the order of service. When to pour the wine, when to stand motionless by the couch, when to laugh at a guest's jest. There is no room for fatigue, no allowance for thought. Perfection is not rewarded, it is required. As the guests arrive, the villa transforms. Lamps blaze against the marble walls, their flames caught in gilded mirrors. Perfume burns in shallow bowls. Laughter rises, filling the rooms with a warmth that never reaches the slaves. The concubine stands behind his master, eyes lowered, holding a silver jug. He can feel the heat from the torches on his skin. When the senator raises his cup, he steps forward and pours, careful not to spill a drop. Conversation drifts around him. Politics, philosophy, gossip, spoken in the tones of men who believe their comfort is civilization. When the musicians begin to play, he takes his place in the center of the room. The song he sings is one he has rehearsed for weeks, its words written centuries ago to praise the beauty of youth. The guests listen, smiling, unaware that the voice they admire belongs to someone who does not own it. When the song ends, applause follows. The master's hand rests briefly on his shoulder. It feels like approval, almost like affection. It is neither. It is ownership reaffirmed. After the banquet, he follows his master to the baths. Steam curls from the caldarium, thick with the scent of herbs and sweat. The concubine kneels by the pool, holding towels, oils, and a bronze strigil. He rubs oil along the master's shoulders, scrapes the skin clean, dries the body he cannot refuse. Around them, other attendants perform the same service for other men, a quiet choreography of devotion and degradation. The laughter that echoes through the chamber is casual, harmless to those who make the jokes. When they return home, the villa sleeps again. The concubine lingers in the courtyard, beneath the moonlight that falls through the open roof. He looks up at the stars, the same stars that shine over the cities he came from, the same stars that do not care who owns whom. For a few breaths, he allows himself to remember that there was a time when he was not a possession. The memory feels dangerous. He lets it go. Among the slaves, he holds a strange position. They envy him for his silk, his access to fine food, his place near power. Yet they do not speak to him as one of their own. To them, he is favored, a reminder of what obedience might earn. To the free, he is invisible. Between those two worlds, he belongs to neither. Rome's elite call this arrangement harmony. Every class in its place, every person fulfilling their role. But harmony here is only the absence of choice. The villa glows with light, music, and laughter, yet beneath the surface lies the same silence that fills the marble corridors before dawn. They were adored like art, but owned like tools. If you've listened this far, you already know how easily beauty hides cruelty. History remembers the marble and the gold, but not the trembling hands that polished them. Subscribe to Cave Tales' ancient history so their silence does not become permanent. Or leave your reason for silence in the comments, and let the past judge it. At dawn, the villa wakes again, not with song or prayer, but with the quiet rituals of preservation. The body must be remade every morning, sculpted into the illusion that Rome demanded. Age was the greatest enemy, and time, an insult to perfection. The concubine's day begins with pain, disguised as care. He kneels beside a stone basin filled with water chilled overnight. A servant brings a bowl of pumice, its surface rough as sand. He presses it to his skin and drags it downward, again and again, until the first sting gives way to numbness. The motion removes the fine hair from his arms, his chest, his legs. When he is finished, the water beneath him is tinged with pink. The overseer inspects the work, nods, and hands him a cloth soaked in vinegar to cleanse the rawness. Next comes the powder, a mixture of ground lead and chalk. He dips a sponge into the bowl and smooths it over his face, covering every mark that might betray the passage of time. The fumes sting his eyes, the taste of metal thicken his mouth. His lips are painted with crushed vermilion, his eyelids darkened with antimony dust. The powders make his face pale, delicate, otherworldly. They also poison him, slowly, invisibly. His stomach burns, his head throbs, his teeth ache. None of it matters. The reflection in the mirror must please the master, not the man within it. Diet is another form of control. The steward measures every bite that passes his lips. No bread after sundown, no meat, no salt. The goal is not health but fragility. A concubine who grows strong becomes threatening. One who stays light, soft, and small remains desirable. Hunger becomes a companion, a whisper that never leaves. Some nights he dreams of figs and honey, only to wake and drink water until the craving fades. Physicians visit the villa, not to heal, but to maintain. They carry bronze instruments and bundles of herbs said to delay maturity. One applies a leech behind the boy's ear, claiming the removal of blood will preserve youth. Another brings a potion of myrtle and vinegar, meant to cool the humors that cause men to age. He drinks it under supervision. The taste is bitter. His stomach cramps for hours afterward. Still, the routine continues. Beyond the empire's borders, in markets far from Rome, boys are prepared in different ways. Some are castrated before sale, their voices forever high, their bodies arrested in eternal adolescence. The emperor has outlawed the practice within the city, but merchants know how to avoid the law. They bring their goods from Syria, Cappadocia, and beyond, already altered, already broken. In Rome, they command a price higher than gold. Their bodies, fixed in unnatural youth, become living trophies of wealth and defiance. The buyers call them pure. Every evening, before the master's guests arrive, a different ritual begins, perfuming. The concubine stands naked in the center of the chamber as attendants move around him, brushing his skin with oils from Arabia and India. Cinnamon for the neck, frankincense for the wrists, myrrh along the collarbone. The scent is meant to announce his presence before he enters the room, to linger long after he leaves. The cost of the oil could feed a family for a month. Yet it is spent each night, poured over flesh that does not belong to itself. The master's favorite perfume is spikenard, sharp, earthy, impossible to forget. It seeps into the boy's pores until it becomes part of him. He smells it when he breathes, when he dreams, when he tries to imagine what freedom might taste like. In the city's streets, people turn their heads as he passes, recognizing the scent of luxury. They admire the sheen of his hair, the smoothness of his skin, the glow of health that is really sickness. To them, he is proof of refinement. To himself, he is a mask of pain that never fades. As months turn into years, the maintenance grows harder. The skin no longer heals as quickly from the pumice. The lead powder clings less easily. The starvation sharpens the bones until they press against the silk. Still, the routine continues. Rome does not allow its possessions to change. To age is to become disposable. And so the boy learns to chase the illusion that destroys him, to polish his suffering until it gleams. When the master touches his face and says, "You are unchanged," it is meant as praise. It is also a sentence. The boy lowers his eyes, hiding the truth that behind the pale mask, every breath is a negotiation with pain. This is how Rome kept its beauty. Through daily sacrifice, through bodies ground down to maintain the fantasies of the powerful. The villas shone because someone bled in silence. The marble stayed white because flesh was scrubbed raw against it. If this feels unbearable, imagine living it. History isn't entertainment, it's confession. Subscribe to Cave Tales Ancient History if you believe truth should hurt sometimes. Or comment why comfort means more than remembrance. The years pass quietly, the way water smooths a stone. Seasons blur into each other, and the villa that once seemed endless grows smaller, more suffocating. The boy who once drew every gaze at the banquet now moves unnoticed through its corridors. His face, once pale with youth, shows the faint shadow of maturity. His shoulders broaden, his voice deepens. Rome's perfection has a time limit, and he has reached it. The first signs come subtly. The steward's tone shifts, less indulgent, more brisk. The tailor measures him for new garments but does not replace the silk with the same quality. Guests begin to ask where the new boy is. The master laughs, avoids the question, and then, one evening, answers it himself. He's grown. The word lands like a sentence. In the mornings, the routine continues, but differently. The basin is still filled, the oil still brought, yet the overseer's eyes linger not on beauty but on flaw. The skin is no longer smooth enough. The eyes, once wide with innocence, now carry awareness, a kind of quiet that unnerves those who prefer obedience without memory. The boy learns to hide it, but the silence betrays him. The master begins to spend more time away from the villa, attending dinners elsewhere. When he returns, he smells of another perfume, a different oil, the scent of a new possession. By his 18th year, the change is complete. He is no longer called by the soft name the master once gave him, but by his place. You there? He still serves, still performs, but not at the center of the room. He pours wine at the edge of the table, refills lamps when the flame burns low. His songs are no longer requested. His presence, once decoration, now stands as a reminder of time's cruelty and Rome's refusal to see it. The economic logic of the empire allows no sentiment. When value fades, replacement follows. The steward keeps careful accounts of every expense: food, oil, training. The boy's worth is calculated against his cost, and when the numbers fall out of balance, a decision is made. One morning, a scribe arrives with a small chest of records. The boy's name, written once in elegant ink, is scratched through. A new name takes its place. He is sold quietly, without spectacle, to a merchant who deals in flesh. The price is less than a tenth of what he once commanded. The merchant inspects him with the same cold precision the senators once admired. The boy's hair is darker now, his features stronger, but to the buyer, those are flaws, not virtues. He will fetch some coin in the brothels near the Subura, where senators and soldiers alike go to forget the laws they wrote. The journey to the lower city feels like a descent into another world. The air grows thicker, the streets narrower. The sound of laughter here is different, rough, unguarded, stained with wine and despair. In a small, windowless room beneath a tavern, he is introduced to his new master, a man who speaks in coins rather than words. The terms are simple. Obedience remains, but refinement is no longer required. In that place, he meets others like himself. Boys once kept in villas, once painted and perfumed, now stripped of the marble's reflection. Some are older, some younger, all bound by the same fate. They speak little, their voices low, their eyes fixed on the ground. Rome has no word for mercy. It has only commerce. One night, as the noise from the tavern above fades, the boy sits beside a cracked wall and traces the marks carved into it by others before him. Names, dates, prayers. He adds nothing. His hands, once trained to play music and serve wine, now tremble as he holds a cup of water. He drinks slowly, remembering the garden, the sound of fountains, the perfume that used to cling to his skin. It has been replaced by the smell of oil, sweat, and wine. He wonders if anyone in the villa remembers him. He knows the answer. Some concubines do not survive these years. Disease takes them, or despair, or the violence of those who no longer see them as human. Others vanish into the endless machinery of Roman labor, sent to farms, mills, or kitchens. The fortunate few are freed, Though freedom itself is a kind of exile, Rome does not welcome what it has used and discarded. For the master, the loss is nothing. Another boy stands now where the first once stood, his skin untouched, his smile rehearsed. The villa continues its rhythm, music, wine, and laughter echoing through marble halls, untouched by the suffering that sustains them. In the archives centuries later, a fragment of a household ledger will survive. The name of a concubine, sold at 18 for 1,200 denarii. No reason given. No record kept of what became of him. Only a column of numbers. The empire that called itself eternal preserved everything, its roads, its laws, its glory, except the names of those who built it. If this story feels heavy, it should. Rome's perfection demanded that someone disappear for every statue that gleamed. Imagine watching youth fade and knowing it meant erasure. If that thought unsettles you, it should linger. Subscribe to Cave Tales Ancient History to keep their silence from being final. Or tell us in the comments why forgetting them feels easier. Rome's cruelty was never chaos. It was law. Every act of ownership, every humiliation, every life traded in the markets of the empire rested upon the words etched into its legal codes. In Rome, justice was written with precision and indifference. The jurists called it Dominica Potestas, the power of the master, absolute and unchallenged. Under it, a slave was not a person but a possession. Flesh and spirit were entered into ledgers beside livestock, recorded in the same ink, taxed with the same certainty. The concept was elegant in its simplicity. Whatever belonged to the master existed only through his will. He could feed, starve, strike, or sell. He could destroy the body and claim no sin, because the body was his own. The 12 Tables, Rome's ancient foundation of law, made this clear. The father held power of life and death over his household. The master inherited the same over his slaves. From that line of reasoning came the quiet sanction of endless cruelty. The law never mentioned consent, because the idea itself did not exist for the enslaved. A slave could not refuse, could not accuse, could not testify. In court, their words were considered meaningless unless extracted under torture. Truth, in Roman eyes, required pain to be proven. The body, even in agony, served as evidence for its owner's right. It was the perfect system of silence, one that demanded no defense because it defined suffering as property's privilege. In the Senate, philosophers debated virtue and duty while their own servants stood at the walls, motionless, trained to pretend they could not hear. The Stoics spoke of order in the universe, of a hierarchy that placed each being in its natural position. To them, slavery was not injustice but harmony, proof that some souls were born to rule and others to serve. Stoic teachers praised restraint, urging masters to treat their slaves with moderation, not mercy. Their compassion extended only so far as it preserved obedience. Epicureans argued differently, but arrived in the same place. Pleasure was the measure of life, they said, and ownership a natural extension of human desire. To enjoy beauty, one must possess it. And so philosophy became justification, gilding cruelty with reason. Every poem written to a concubine, every statue of a kneeling servant, every letter between patricians boasting of their households, each one reaffirmed the same truth. Domination was not shameful, it was civilization. Rome's law was careful to protect property, not people. If a master killed a slave, there was no trial. If a slave resisted, there was no appeal. If a concubine aged, sickened, or was cast away, the record showed only loss of value, never crime. Even when emperors issued reforms, edicts declaring that excessive cruelty was unbecoming of a Roman, the enforcement was ceremonial. Punishment came not for the act, but for the scandal it caused. Rome could tolerate anything except the embarrassment of being seen too clearly. Cultural reverence reinforced what law had written. Children learned from birth that the household mirrored the empire itself. One will, one command, many obedient hands. To question authority was to challenge the gods. The poets who praised love between masters and concubines turned possession into affection, power into romance. The theater echoed those illusions in laughter and applause. And every time an audience laughed, the silence of the enslaved deepened. In private, some masters convinced themselves they were benevolent. They gave small gifts, spoke gently, believed kindness erased ownership. But law and mercy never met. Benevolence within slavery was decoration, another mask on the face of power. The concubine's freedom, even when granted, remained conditional. Rome's generosity could never undo Rome's design. The invisible chains of the empire were not forged in iron, but in habit, belief, and legality. They wound through every villa, every court, every mind. By the time the system began to fade, it no longer needed guards. Those born inside it could no longer imagine another world. Rome wrote laws to excuse cruelty. We write comments to justify inaction. If you've learned something, prove it matters. Subscribe to Cave Tales Ancient History, or leave your defense of apathy below. Rebellion, in Rome, did not roar, it whispered. It breathed quietly beneath the marble floors and between the cracks of obedience, surviving where open defiance could not. The empire that built monuments to power also built a silence so perfect that only those trapped within it could hear the echoes of its breaking. Inside the villas, rebellion took the shape of small, invisible gestures. A glance that lasted a heartbeat too long, a pause before an order obeyed, a word spoken in a language forbidden. Among the concubines, those gestures became a kind of code, a secret language built from fragments of breath and movement. A lowered gaze meant danger nearby. A hand brushed against a shoulder in passing could mean safety or warning. They lived under the eyes of masters who believed they saw everything, yet it was in their blindness that resistance learned to survive. When one boy was punished, others learned to fake the same injury, limping in unison, confusing the overseers until no one knew who had defied them first. When one was sold away, those left behind murmured his name under their breath while polishing silver or sweeping floors, a quiet act of remembrance that Rome would have called useless. To them, it was survival. Memory was the only freedom left, and they guarded it like contraband. Some resisted through the body itself, the only weapon they still possessed. Illness became refuge. Fevers were faked, fainting rehearsed. When exhaustion overwhelmed them, they made it seem deliberate, not weakness, but strategy. A day in isolation, even under watch, was a day not owned. The masters saw sickness as flaw, but the sick boy saw it as reprieve, a small rebellion disguised as frailty. Others fought back through sabotage. A spilled amphora of wine, a misremembered verse in song, a broken instrument string at a banquet, all small enough to seem accidental, all deliberate. The masters called it carelessness. The slaves knew it was protest. Each mistake carried risk, but also meaning. To be punished for something chosen, rather than commanded, was to taste agency again, however briefly. There were moments, rare and fragile, when resistance took the shape of connection. Among the concubines, friendship itself was forbidden. Attachment weakened obedience. Yet bonds formed anyway, in secret corners of courtyards, during the brief moments before dawn. They shared pieces of stolen bread, whispered stories of the places they came from, recited verses not taught by tutors but remembered from mothers and sisters long lost. For a few breaths, they became human again. One night, a boy told another about the sea beyond Ostia, where ships left for lands the empire had not yet conquered. He described the horizon as a line that could never be owned. The next morning, the listener was gone. No one knew whether he had fled or been taken. His absence became a legend, told in whispers as proof that escape was possible. Hope, in Rome, was a dangerous contagion. Once it took root, it could not be eradicated. But not all rebellions survived. Some could no longer bear the waiting, the endless rehearsed smiles and measured movements. There were those who found escape in final silence. They used the very tools of their servitude, the cords of curtains, the oils meant for their skin, to end the ritual themselves. The masters called it waste, as though even in death the body should have remained useful. The others called it freedom. Yet the most enduring resistance was not flight or death, but endurance itself. To wake each morning, to stand again, to maintain the mask long enough to hide the mind behind it, this too was defiance. Every moment survived was a moment stolen from a system that believed ownership could erase will. Their rebellion was not written in blood or law. It was written in persistence. Centuries later, historians would read the legal codes, the letters, the poems, and see only obedience. But between the lines, beneath the smooth Latin phrasing, something else remains. A hesitation, a blank space where voices once existed. That absence is their victory. It is proof that they lived beyond the roles assigned to them, if only in fragments, if only in whispers. If you've listened this far, you already know the truth Rome tried to bury. No system is absolute, and no silence lasts forever. Subscribe to Cave Tales' ancient history so their whispers can still be heard. Or leave your silence in the comments, and let the past decide what it means. Empires age as surely as the bodies that build them. Rome, that eternal monument of marble and dominion, began to crack not with thunder but with silence. The kind that settles over a city when wealth runs dry and belief turns inward. The same villas that once rang with laughter, music, and the rustle of silk grew quiet. The banquets thinned, the perfumes faded, and the boys who once stood like ornaments behind the couches found themselves dismissed without ceremony. It began with money. The coin that once flowed endlessly from conquest began to vanish. The armies cost more, the provinces yielded less, and the patrician class, the masters of marble and flesh, felt the strain first. Villas that had housed hundreds of slaves were reduced to a handful of servants. The markets where boys were traded still opened each morning, but fewer buyers came. Even the dealers' voices lost their confidence, their cries of prices swallowed by the uncertainty of the times. Rome's appetite had outgrown its stomach. The economic decay struck hardest at the illusion of permanence. Masters who could no longer afford luxury learned the cost of dependence on cruelty. The great households, once empires in miniature, began to crumble. Some sold their estates, others sold their slaves to pay debts. A few released them, not from mercy, but because ownership had become too expensive to maintain. The system that had once seemed invincible began to unravel in the same slow rhythm that had once sustained it. Transaction by transaction, life by life. In the city itself, a new language began to take shape. It did not come from the Senate or the law courts, but from the catacombs beneath the streets. The followers of a new faith whispered of a God who saw the slave and the master as equals. At first, Rome ignored them. Then it persecuted them. But faith, unlike empire, does not depend on wealth. It grows in poverty, feeds on injustice, and speaks most loudly to those who have nothing left to lose. By the 4th century, Christianity had climbed from the shadows into the palace. Constantine, emperor and convert, wove faith into law. The philosophers' defense of slavery as natural order began to falter against a doctrine that called it sin. Yet the change was not revolution, it was translation. The old rituals of ownership found new forms in the language of morality. Rome had not forgotten how to command. It had only learned to sanctify its commands. The laws shifted slowly, cautiously. Constantine issued decrees forbidding extreme cruelty. Justinian later went further, declaring that no child should be taken for concubinage. But laws written on parchment did not change what had been carved into culture. Enforcement was rare, exceptions many. A man of status still owned what his wealth could reach. The trade continued, only hidden now beneath different names: apprenticeships, servitude, charity. The language of property softened, but the meaning remained. Christianity reshaped Rome's conscience, but not its hunger. Where the temples had once praised Venus and Bacchus, churches now praised humility and purity. Yet the same hands that clasped in prayer still commanded obedience. The villas decayed into monasteries. The concubines became servants of the saints. The power shifted from marble to altar, but the hierarchy endured. Rome had changed its gods, not its soul. The economic ruin deepened. Famine spread through the provinces. Plague swept through the streets. The empire's heart, once swollen with conquest, began to fail. Gold was melted for soldiers' pay, statues broken for stone, mansions abandoned to dust. Even the slave markets closed at times, not from compassion, but because there was no one left to buy. The system that had thrived on the labor of the enslaved now collapsed beneath its own excess. The villa masters who had once owned the world now bartered for food. And yet, as the empire grew old, the memory of its order did not die. Its habits endured in every kingdom that followed. The Byzantine courts adopted its laws. The European nobility imitated its power. Even when the name of Rome faded from maps, its shadow remained. The idea that civilization required hierarchy, that some were born to rule and others to serve. The form of slavery changed, but its spirit moved through time like a ghost, wearing new faces, speaking new languages. When the barbarians came and the city fell, the marble crumbled, but the chains did not. They simply shifted shape. In monasteries, servants bowed to abbots. In manors, peasants worked the soil for lords. In markets from Africa to the Mediterranean, new traders rose where the Roman ones had fallen. The empire had collapsed, but its machinery had not stopped. It had simply found new hands to turn the wheel. The end of Rome was not liberation. It was transformation. The same logic that once polished marble floors with human labor now built cathedrals and kingdoms. The same voices that once justified ownership with philosophy now did so with scripture. And the same silence that once hung in the villas settled again, this time beneath the sound of church bells. The empire aged, but its cruelty remained young. Every civilization that came after would inherit its habits, its hierarchies, its excuses. The faces changed, the names changed, but the order endured. Rome had promised eternity, and in its darkness, it kept that promise. If you've listened this far, you already know that history's cruelty does not end. It adapts. The fall of Rome was not the end of slavery, only the rehearsal of its next act. Subscribe to Cave Tales Ancient History if you believe the past must be told until its echoes fall silent. Or leave your silence in the comments and let history decide what it means. Centuries pass, but the echo remains. It hums beneath the noise of cities, hidden under the sound of machines, markets, and progress. Empires fall, nations rise, faiths change, but the pattern does not. The faces are different, the names are different, the chains are harder to see, but the rhythm is the same. Rome is gone, yet it continues. Reborn in every place where power disguises cruelty as necessity, and commerce calls exploitation order. You see it now in airports and ports, in narrow rooms lit by a single bulb, in factories where hands work without pause, in digital markets where bodies are sold without ever meeting the buyer. It is the same system, refined by centuries of practice. The contracts have new words, but the meaning has not changed. The old Roman term dominica potestas, ownership absolute, lives under different names: employer, handler, client. Property no longer needs to be branded. It signs its name on paper instead. The traffickers of the modern world speak the same language as the dealers in Rome once did. They talk of value, condition, availability. They measure human beings by utility, not by existence. The routes that once brought boys from Syria and Greece now stretch through deserts, oceans, and cities. They follow poverty, war, and hunger the way the Romans once followed conquest. Each time a border shifts, the trade adjusts. Each time a law is written, it learns to move around it. The illusion of progress hides these truths well. We build monuments to human rights, but beneath them run the same channels of demand and supply. We celebrate the abolition of slavery, then buy what it produces in silence. The marble villas have become corporate towers. The masters wear suits. The concubines hold phones instead of lyres. Their obedience is still purchased, their youth still consumed, their names still forgotten when the cost rises too high. Modern law calls it trafficking. Economics calls it labor. Society calls it tragedy. But Rome would have called it normal. It is the same cold arithmetic of survival. The desperate sold to the wealthy, the powerless shaped to please, the suffering disguised as opportunity. The empire no longer stands, yet its reasoning endures, dressed in the language of civilization. Even the rituals persist. The lotions, the beauty, the illusion of perfection, all echo the villa's rituals of control. The advertisements that sell the image of youth are the same incantations whispered in Roman markets, promising eternal desirability at the price of self-erasure. The faces that smile from screens are painted in the same colors the concubines once wore, the same toxic powders now reborn as cosmetics, the same demand for flawlessness that once justified torment. We tell ourselves that history is past, that the world has moved forward, that cruelty is ancient. But beneath every new order lies the old one, hidden but breathing. Rome's ghosts didn't vanish. They changed their uniforms. They walk in crowds, speak in slogans, and trade in contracts. They build systems that pretend to protect, but instead preserve the same hierarchy that was carved into the first stones of the empire. Look long enough and you can still see the outlines. The auction disguised as recruitment, the ownership disguised as opportunity, the obedience taught through fear of hunger instead of the whip. The empires of today have no emperors, yet the same invisible chains hold steady. We wear them more willingly now, convinced they are freedom. What Rome created was not merely a civilization, it was a template. It taught the world how to justify inequality with elegance, how to turn suffering into spectacle, how to hide cruelty behind beauty. That template has survived every fall, every fire, every moral awakening. It is here, alive, in the structure of our world, too familiar to be seen, too ancient to be erased. And still, we call ourselves different. Still, we use the word modern as though time alone absolves. But the truth lingers, the same truth that once filled the marble corridors at dawn. Humanity has never been free from its hunger to own. We have only learned to rename it. If you reach this far, you already care more than most. But history fades when silence grows. Subscribe to Cave Tales Ancient History. Not for numbers, but for voices that can't speak anymore. And if you won't, at least tell us why in the comments. The villa stands again, empty now. The marble still glows beneath the faint light of a dying sun. The fountains that once whispered luxury have dried to silence. Dust has settled where silk once trailed. The air is heavy with absence. If you listen closely, you can almost hear it. The faint echo of sandals across the stone, the murmur of distant laughter, the brittle clink of glass. But it isn't real. The sound belongs to ghosts. The masters are gone, the slaves gone, the empire itself crumbled into soil. Only the marble endures, cold and flawless, its surface polished by centuries of memory and forgetting. In the atrium, the candlelight that once danced on perfume and flesh is gone. The walls are cracked, the mosaics faded. A few fragments remain. Faces carved in tile, eyes too bright for the ruin they inhabit. Somewhere beneath the floor, beneath centuries of dust and ruin, lie the remains of those who once served, unnamed, unmarked, unseen. Their stories do not appear in scrolls. The chroniclers wrote of wars and emperors, not of those who brushed the hair of gods made flesh. Their voices were not worth the ink, but history has strange tides. It buries and then reveals. And now, as we walk through the ruins, it is their silence that speaks the loudest. The concubine's laughter, once rehearsed for the pleasure of others, now echoes through broken columns as something else, an accusation, or perhaps a warning. The beauty that once adorned Rome's glory has become its gravestone. The marble, unchanging, has outlived its makers. Its perfection is now emptiness. You stand there, in the middle of what was once the heart of the world, and feel it, the stillness, the weight of every unspoken life pressed into the stone beneath your feet. The empire's achievements surround you, yet what lingers is not power, not glory, but quiet. The silence is not peace. It is memory refusing to fade. It holds everything that history tried to forget. The trembling hands that poured the wine, the voices that whispered in fear, the faces that smiled on command. All of it remains, just beneath the marble's sheen. The wind moves through the open archways, carrying the scent of dust and rain. The same air that once filled the lungs of emperors now belongs to no one. The villa, the empire, the world that once defined civilization, all reduced to stillness. Rome fell, but the silence remains. And as that silence stretches into eternity, someone must break it. That is where stories begin again. Not with conquest, but with remembrance. Subscribe to Cave Tales Ancient History and let the forgotten breathe once more. Not for numbers, not for fame, but because silence should never be the last word.